In this part of the .NET MAUI crash course, we're going to learn about MVVM data binding and getting our monkey data from a remote source. Now, before we dive into the world that is MVVM and data binding, let me do a quick note that this video is part of a full course, a crash course on .NET MAUI. So the playlist should pop up on your screen right now or find a link down below. But just so you know, I would highly recommend watch the other videos as well so that you know what it's about and what we're building. Just wanted to quickly point that out. Now, MVVM and data binding, that's kind of like where the magic begins for like most Microsoft products, because a lot of Microsoft products are using this, right? So that's the good thing as well. If you understand how it works for one platform, then you already know how to work with it for .NET MAUI as well. But let me just go over the theory here for a little bit before we go and see how to actually implement it in our Monkey Finder application. Now, while it's called MVVM, it makes more sense to me to put the view first, then the view model, and then the model. So VVMM, but that doesn't have the same ring to it, I guess. But let's start with the view, right? So the view is kind of like your outside thing. That is the user-facing thing. That is the thing that you click around, tap on, and that is also the thing that doesn't want to have a lot of logic, right? Because if you start writing logic inside of your view, then things can become tangled, and it's hard to kind of like do unit tests because all your code is dependent on the UI, and for unit tests you don't have a UI typically. So that's not great, right? And also if you want to kind of replace that view, or maybe you're going to implement A/B testing where you have different views maybe randomly or depending on some condition, then it's not really great because now you have to duplicate that logic because all your logic is in the view, right? So that's not what you want. You want to view, just to view things and interact and pass on signals to the view model. And in your view model, that's kind of like you also don't want to connect like everything from your view directly to the models and your services and whatnot. So that's why we have this view model, because your view model is responsible for catching all of those signals and switching around basically properties. And those are a lot of properties that can have to do with how things are viewed, right, inside of your view, how things are presented. So you don't want to clutter all your models that might end up in a database with things like, hey, is my UI currently busy? Or what kind of background color should something have, right? That's not things that you want to have in your database with your models, with your data. So that's why we have the view model there in between. That has kind of like all the logic that is needed for the view, but it's also like passing on things to actually the model where your business logic and that kind of thing is. So from your view model, which is a representation of the screen basically that you want to show tied to one view, and there is all the properties and all the signals are going back and forth. And actually that's happening through data binding, but I will get to that. And then the last thing kind of like is in this pattern is the model, right? So that's where you do all your business logic. That is where you are going to persist things to the data layer or all that kind of stuff. So that's how that all fits together. And then there's one ingredient that's not really in the MVVM name, but that's a binder, and that has everything to do with the data binding. And in the Microsoft world, the binder is usually XAML. You can definitely also do it in code if that's what you like. But typically you will see that everything is done in XAML. And what that does is, again, if you are using events, then that is tied to your view, right? You have to have that event know the actual control that is firing the event. So there will always be the tight coupling. Or you want to reference to controls directly. So you have to give your controls a name. And again, then you're going to tightly couple your view with the logic. And that's not what you typically want if you want to reuse your code or do unit testing or do any of the stuff that I just mentioned. So how else could you do that? Well, data binding is kind of the answer. And with data binding, you're basically just going to say like, hey, I have this property on my view. So for instance, let's make it very concrete. In our last video, we had the collection view and we had that item source, right? And in that item source, we could say we had this kind of like static array in there now. But in this video, we're going to see how we can use that item source, and we're going to say, hey, I want you to get your data from a property that's in my view model now. it will become more clear whenever we go look at some code. But then from that property, whenever that property is populated, the view will automatically see like, hey, okay, something is happening here. I should do my new layout. I should update to actually view that data. So, you're only going to loosely couple, if you will, to say like, hey, it's referenced by this kind of property name in my view model. And that's also where the confusion starts for a lot of people. Like, there is coupling. You are referring to property names in the view model, but it isn't really like checked at build time, right? There are tricks for that, which we're going to see, so that you can actually figure out if something is wrong in your properties. But that binder inside of the XAML, a lot of stuff happens that is not really clear unless you really know about it. And a lot of that has to do with the INotifyPropertyChanged, which is an interface that can signal to the view like, hey, something has changed. INotifyPropertyChanged, a property has changed on my view model, and in XAML it's built in to hook into that interface to look if something is there, if something's being signaled like, hey, in the view model something has changed, and XAML will then see, hey, does the view model actually implement that interface? Whenever it does, it will register for updates, and whenever a update happens, the XAML knows that it actually has to update its views. So this kind of like sounds meta and theoretic and abstract maybe, but hopefully when we get to some code, it will become clear how this all fits together. So let's actually just stop with the theory right now, and let's see how to do this in our Monkey Finder application. So here I have started Visual Studio 2022, and this is exactly the point where we left off. If you remember correctly, we have the repository. So this is basically the folder, step 2, MVVM. So go open the solution for that one. And here I have it running on Windows right now. We can see our 3 monkeys, which we can see here in our view and main page. And so here we have like that item source that I just mentioned, right? With now a static array with like 3 records in there. And this is what we're going to change to actually get the data from a remote source on the internet, and also get rid of this static array and filling that data from our view model. So if we go back here to our project structure basically, and we open this and I stop running the application for a little bit, then you can see here the folders already. We have the view and the view model and the model, right? So we already did something with the view for the main page. We already did something for the model. We have the monkey right here. And now what we need to do is get our view model up and running, so that we can tie all the things together. So actually, let's go to our view model folder right here. And you can see this base view model right here, which is going to be the base for our other classes, right? So we have this base view model because if you're going to implement things like the INotifyPropertyChanged, then you probably want to do that in a base view model, of which the rest can inherit, so that they're automatically implementing that as well. Because we have some tricks to do that. So here, if we want to inherit or implement an interface, we can say here INotify, and it should probably come up here, INotifyPropertyChanged. So we can just do this, and then it will start complaining that we don't implement all the things in here, right? Because that's how an interface works. We need to implement all the things so that whenever someone hooking into the INotifyPropertyChanged, like your XAML binding engine, will know what properties and what methods are there that it can use. So we can right-click this IntelliSense, or we can do the little light bulb here, or you can right-click it and do quick actions and refactorings, and then you can say implement interface, and it will give you all the things, which is in this case only just one thing. And we have this property changed event handler, and this is going to be fired whenever a property is changed. Well, actually, we need to do that ourselves, but near the end of the video, I'm going to show you a little trick that will, allow you to do it much, much easier and save you a lot of code. So make sure to stay tuned. But actually, we also do not want to do this all manually. So what we want to do next is implement this thing to actually trigger this, right? And what we can do, I will paste in a little bit of code here, is we just want to have this little on property changed here, which we can call whenever a property or whenever something has changed. And this is like made a little bit generic. So what you can see happening here is we have to pass in a string for the name of the property that has been changed on our view model. Now, a little trick that we can do here is specify the attribute here, the caller member name, and that will automatically fill in the name of the calling property. So whenever we call this on property changed from a property, we will see that in a minute, then we don't need to worry about this name because it will automatically get the name through this attribute, and it will know like, hey, the property, the monkey name has been changed, has been calling this on property changed, so this name will automatically be populated by monkey name. And what it's then going to do is going to hook into this property changed thing here and see if it's not null, right? So see if anything hooked into this event, if anyone wants to receive the signal for this event. And then it's going to invoke it with this and the new property changed event args with the name that is coming in. So now we have kind of like a generic way of signaling the view that something has changed in our base view model. Now, if we go look at our monkey details view, or let's go with the monkeys view model, so that's the one for our main page, you can see that this implements that base view model, right? So this will automatically also have all the things that we've just implemented, but we'll worry about that in a little bit. Now, what I also already mentioned is that you maybe want to have things to show if your interface is busy, yes or no. So I'm going to implement a couple of extra things here, like a Boolean is busy, a string for the title that we're going to show, title, and then we have the rest of our code here. And now let's make this into property. So this is actually a very important thing. If you're going to do data binding with XAML and MVVM and this kind of stuff, everything that you're binding to from your view has to be a public property. It can't be a field. It can't be a public bool is busy. If you're going to do it like this, it's not going to work, and you're going to scratch your head why it's not going to work. I definitely, believe me, I have fallen for this. You really need to make it a property with a get set, at least the get, right? You can make it a private set if that's what you want. It has to be a property, else it's going to fail. It's not going to pick up on it. So if your binding, if your MVVM, your data binding is not working, figure out if it's actually a property, because that will save you a lot of headaches maybe. So we have these backing fields, but now we also want to have the properties. And actually, let me just copy again a little bit of code, because this is a lot of typing, and let me just put that here. And it's kind of like the same for the is busy in the title. So for the get, we're just going to return this private field, right, which is just a field that we have for backing this thing up. Here in the setter, something interesting is happening, right? So we're going to see, like, if it's the same value, then we're not going to do anything. We're just going to return, because nothing really has changed. Else, we're going to set the is busy to the value. And here you can see the on property changed is going to be called. And this is the thing that we have implemented down here, right? And you can see that we're not specifying this name. So in this case, the name will automatically be populated with is busy. And for the title, it will be automatically populated with title. So that's how the UI knows, like, hey, I need to reach out to the title property, and I need to go through all the controls that are referencing this title property and update that in the view. So that's kind of like how that works. But we're not there yet. We don't have anything in the view, but now, you know, we have implemented everything on our base view model, and we can use this in every one of our kind of like inheriting view models. Now, and this is where kind of like the use of the view model gets into play as well, because, you know, we have this is busy one, but, you know, maybe you want to have some controls that are visible based on the is busy property, maybe a little view spinner, loading spinner, but you also maybe want to have controls that are then visible whenever something is not busy, right? So, and this is stuff that you don't want to have in your actual models. So what you also might want to have is like public bool not is busy, right? Or is not busy. Maybe that makes more sense, is not busy. And then we can return kind of like not is busy, right? So now we have the same property, but now kind of like the inverse one. There are other ways to solve this. There is also in XAML a concept that is known as value converters, which is for another day. I definitely have videos on that. Go check that out. But for now, we're keeping it simple. So, you know, you can easily create a property like this that does the inverse. But then you want to signal it for both, right? You want to signal it for both is busy and is not busy, because else the elements are going to show up for is busy, but the is not busy is not going to get the signal, because we're only doing on property change for is busy, right? So what you can now do is you can still specify the name. So we can also do it for on property changed, and then specify name of is not busy, right? So now we are signaling it also for this property, and it will get picked up for both. But you can see this is a lot of code to just do these things. So let me first implement the full story for like our base view model, and our view, so that we have this full end-to-end solution right here. And then at the end, I'm going to show you how to get rid of all this boilerplate code with the CommunityToolkit.Mvvm framework, which makes this a lot easier. But for now, let's focus on actually getting this to work. So we're going to switch gears here for a little bit. Let's focus on the service to actually get the monkey data. So I'm going to go to my Solution Explorer, and we also have a folder already for our services. And in this case, there's already a monkey service. So let's open that up, and I'm going to add some code here. So we're going to add this list of monkey, which is going to be our monkey list. And if you were like, working with, used to working with older C# and .NET versions, this is kind of a new way to introduce new objects. And this is the exact same thing as new list monkey, like this, but you can now just leave out the type because we already know the type from the left hand side. So we can just remove this one and do new. So that's what's going on here, just so you're not confused. And we've introduced this little method here, which does the get monkeys, and that returns our monkey list. I promised you to actually get this from a remote source, so we're going to need an HTTP client, right? We're going to need to get that monkeys from somewhere. So let's also introduce a constructor here, a public monkey service, and inside of that, we actually want to introduce an HTTP client. So also here at the top, let's do HTTP client, and I'm not going to initialize that just yet. That's what I'm going to do here. So you can say this HTTP client is new HTTP client. You can see the IntelliSense and IntelliCode. I don't even know what service this is anymore. Will kick in. So now we have this HTTP client, and we can also say here, so in our get monkeys, we can say if monkey list dot count, well, actually not, is 0, is more than 0, we can return our monkey list here from the get monkeys, because we're just going to get this list once, right? And whenever it's filled, then you can just return the monkey list right away. If that's not the case, then we are going to actually, get our monkeys from a remote source. So again, I'm going to paste in some code here, and what we're going to do is get this response through our HTTP client, and we're going to do get async. This refers to James Montemagno's website, who has this very complicated API, which is just a static files of monkeys.json, which is the exact same JSON file that you can find here in the resources and raw. And we have this kind of like monkey data here as well. That's the exact same file. But we are getting this from James's website, or you can get something else if that's what you want, of course. And then whenever our response is success status code, so this will just do an HTTP request, go out to this URL, get the JSON file, and we can check here if that succeeded, yes or no. And we're mostly going to focus on the happy path with all of this code here, so it's up to you to implement the kind of like error paths here. But here is the status success code. We're going to fill our monkey list with response.content, so that's the body of our response, right? So that we're getting back, that's the actual JSON contents. We're going to say read from JSON async, and we're going to deserialize that in a list of monkeys. Now you can see it doesn't really know what we're trying to do here, so let's right click, quick actions and refactorings, and we're going to do using system.net.htp.json, because JSON is now built into the .NET framework as well. And now it knows that it needs to deserialize this from the JSON, and we get this list of monkeys. Now, if for some reason this doesn't work, there is instructions in the repository's README. Again, links are all down below for this step 2, part 2, where you can also do this without an internet connection, where you can read it from the file that I just mentioned. So if you want to use this without internet, go check that out, and just paste the lines in here, and it will just work all the same. Actually, let me just show you real quickly what it does. I'll bring it in here, and I'll remove it afterwards. So what this does is go out to the file system, open app package file async, it goes to that monkey data.json, then it opens a stream reader, it will read the contents of that file, and it will still do the JSON deserializer to that same list of monkeys, right? So we will have the exact same thing, but I want to focus on getting it actually from a remote source. So let's just remove this one again. And what we're now going to do is, well, of course, we are going to need to then return still our monkey list here, just so we have everything complete. So now this red squigglies are happy here too, and we have everything complete here. So what we want to do now is actually use this service inside of our view model. So let's again go to our solution explorer, and here let's get rid of these resources. And now I can go to the view models and I can go to the MonkeysViewModel. Now, nothing is in here except for this BaseViewModel, right? So that's what I've been implementing in earlier. And now what we can do is we're going to say a public observable collection of monkeys. Well, it helps me pretty good here. And actually we just need the get. So just to show you that it works with an actual get. And we can say here new again, right? So it suggests me the whole new object thing, but I can just do new so that this collection is initialized. Now, you might wonder what is a observable collection? And the observable collection is kind of like a collection that has INotifyPropertyChanged built in. So this observable collection will also be able to hook into the XAML, or actually the other way around. The XAML will be able to hook into the observable collection, and it will pick up whenever you do monkeys.remove and you remove one or you add one, it will pick up on that and it will refresh the data for you on the view without having you to do anything for that. So that's the observable collection. It will be a collection that automatically notifies the UI that things are being updated. So that is great. Now, what we also want to do is add a little constructor here, monkeys view model, and we want to set that title, right? That title is just a little UI thing that we want to do, and we have this title already set up in the base view model. So we're going to set this to monkey finder, and now we have this nice title as well. And now it's time to bring in our service. So what we're going to do is actually add here using monkey finder.services. And we want to bring in our monkey service right here. And this can just be a private field, so we don't need to do anything fancy here. And what we want to say is this monkey service is new monkey service. Well, there we have it. Now we have this monkey service initialized. But can you spot what is wrong with this? We're not using dependency injection, and dependency injection is something that is built into .NET MAUI these days. So what we're going to do is not do this, but we are going to actually say monkey service here. And what we then want to do is here specify this monkey service here in the constructor and add the monkey service here. So what will happen in a minute is that with dependency injection, we're going to register our monkey service, and that will automatically be resolved, be inputted here, and we have our monkey services as dependency injection here. And again, that is good for your code reuse, that is good for your testability, that is good for all these kinds of things. I'm not going to go into dependency injection too much here. I have a great video on that. Go check it out in the corner of your screen right now, which will give you more background information if you don't know what it is. But this is definitely something that you want to use if you're going to build a real world application. So now we have got this set up, and now let's go actually do something with that service. So right here down to the bottom, I'm going to add this new method right here, which is again going to be getMonkeysAsync. And we're going to leverage our service in here. So what I did first is scaffold here out a little bit with the isBusy, right? So based on if something is busy, if data is being retrieved, especially if you get things from the internet, things can be unpredictable, right? Depending on the internet connection, the speeds, the server, how fast that is, etc. It can take a little while before the data is there. So here we want to leverage that isBusy. And if it's busy and we, for some reason, get again a call here because the user is doing pull to refresh a lot of times, then we're just going to return. We're not going to do anything else. We're going to say try isBusy true. Whenever something happens, then we're going to maybe show an error. But finally, so this is always going to happen, right? Whether the try happens or the catch happens, the finally always happens. And we're going to set this isBusy to false, just so that our view kind of like resets the whole isBusy state, removes the loading indicator and that kind of stuff. Now in the try, we're actually going to get our data. So let's add a new line here, and I'm going to paste in some code. And here you can see we're going to get our monkeys, which we're going to get from our monkey service that was, injected through the dependency constructor injection here. And we're going to call the get monkeys. Now, we're going to see if the monkeys count. So this is our own observable collection here, if that not already has the monkeys, right? If it does have monkeys already, we're going to clear it. We're going to make it empty. And that's kind of like an important one as well. If you're working with observable collections, what you don't want to do is create a new one right here. Because if you do, then you will have to reinitialize the data binding, which you can totally do. But, ideally, you shouldn't have to. So what you want to do is reuse the same collection all the time. So what you want to do is do clear. That will let the UI know like, hey, all the elements are now gone. And then you start building it up again. So we're going to loop through all the monkeys in the results from our monkey service. So the monkeys that are coming from our service on the internet. And we're going to add these monkeys to our collection one by one. So that is how this works. Now for our catch, you can do whatever you want, of course, but I'm just going to say a debug.writeLine just so we know what is going on here whenever something actually goes wrong. So let's just say unable to get monkeys and add our exception.message here just so we know what's going on. And maybe we also want to inform our user because this is not going anywhere, right? So what you also might want to do is say await application, which is, the application that we're currently running. This is an object from .NET MAUI, application.current.main page, and we can call the display alert here. Now, technically, if you are want to get serious about MVVM, this is not really great, right? So let me just type this first and then tell you the rest later. So error, we are going to do the x.message and we're going to do the OK. So this will be a dialog that has a title which says error. Then in the body of our dialog, it's going to print the exception message. And then we have one button which says OK so that the user can continue, right? So typically, this is something that you probably want to have, I don't know, a little bit more informative for your users, but this will get the point across. Now, then you're probably wondering, how am I going to trigger this, right? Because we had events. If you go do a button, you will have like the clicked event. But we can't use events anymore in MVVM world. So instead, we have commands. And the commands kind of like follow the exact same pattern as all the properties that you see here. A command is just a little trigger that will allow you to execute some code. So let's see how that works. I'm going to scroll back up. I'm going to implement a new field here, which is going to be well, actually, let's do it here so that our public and private fields are separated. So I'm going to do a public command, or it can also be an I command for an interfaced one, if that's what you want. And public command get monkeys command. And again, this has to be a property, so be very aware of that. And typically what you want to do, like with the observable collection, you want to initialize it right away. You can definitely also do it in the constructor if that's what you prefer. And for commands, I don't know, it typically happens in the constructor because, also because it can't really be done here because you're going to reference some things that are not created at this point in the C# code. So what we're going to do here is say our get monkeys command is new command, and it's going to have to run async. So you can do async here, and we don't have any parameters, and we're going to say await get monkeys async. This is our method, right? So we can just do this. Now there's variations to this. You can also only do like the method name here, which makes it a little bit less verbose. I think if you're doing non-async stuff, this totally works. But if you want to do it async, then you will have to do this. So what we have now is a command that we can bind to somewhere in the view because this is a property. And whenever we do that, we can execute the code in our get monkeys async. This will start running. This will start populating our monkeys observable collection. And as that is populated, our view will get the signals that something has happened to our collection and the view will get updated. So I think it's about time to actually start looking at our view and implement this stuff. So let's go over to our Solution Explorer again, and this time we're going to go to the View and to our main page. This is where we already implemented the thing for our static array here, so we can kind of remove this whole thing with the item source here. We will get to that in a little bit. The item template is still going to be the same. We still want to see those same monkeys right here. And what we want to do here now at the top in our content page is kind of like the same thing that we did here with the data template, and that is set our X data type, which will help us with like the IntelliSense for all this. So here in the top in our content page, I'm going to say X data type is, and then I want to set view model, which I don't actually have yet, is monkeys view model. So that's like the name of our type, right? And then we need to add a other XML namespace thing like this one. I can just copy and paste this one basically as well. And I'm going to name this the view model because this was a shorthand for all of this namespace stuff, right? And now I don't want to have the monkeyfinder.model, but I want to have the view model. Right? So now it will start picking up, it will go look in the view model namespace, and it will find this monkey's view model. So now we got this all set up, and this is just a thing that will help you edit this XAML right here. So let's save that. And then here, what we can immediately do is for a content page, we can set a title, and in that title, we can do now this. Do opening bracket, and we can say binding. That's how data binding works. You will have to say binding, which will let the XAML know like, hey, you're now going to bind to a property on some object, and we'll hook into that INotifyPropertyChanged. And because we set that X data type, you can now here see all the properties, right? Plus some extra ones, but we can see the is busy, we can see the is not busy, and we can see the monkeys, but we should also see the title that we have set up. So let's do the binding to the title. Now, actually, we want to replace the whole layout here, so let's delete this collection view here as well, and I'm going to first add a grid here as well. And a grid, you know, just like the name implies, you can do things with columns and rows and that kind of stuff. So we have this grid, we have column definitions with stars, which basically means like it will have the space equally divided. So we have two columns, we have a little spacing of 5 in between, we have row definitions, and the star actually means it takes up like the extra space that is there. So in case of 2 stars, it will divide it equally. And here you will have the row definition. So we have 2 rows. One that will take up like all the space, and the other one is auto, so that will automatically be adjusted as we have like buttons at the bottom. We'll see that in a little bit. And we have a row spacing of 0, so there's no space in between. And inside of that, we will add our collection view. And you can see here that our item source now changed from this static array to binding our monkeys. And that is the monkeys in our monkeys view model right here. That's our observable collection, right? So that's how that works together. Now we have a selection mode of none. We're not going to select any monkeys right now, and we're going to set the grid.columnSpan. So this is kind of like an odd one, right? We're referring back to the grid, so this only works whenever it's actually contained in a grid. And we're going to set the column span to 2 because we had 2 columns, right? But we want to have our collection view over these 2 columns. We're only going to use the columns for a button at the bottom. Now, if you remember from the previous video, we want to kind of add back our item template because that is the template for each of the items that's going to be shown, right? So every item, every monkey in our observable collection is going to get that template. And now what you can see is we're going to get that data binding back here. This is, I just pasted in a lot here, this entire item template right here. And we can see it's a data template. We have that X data type that's coming back. A little bit changed about the layout here. We have this grid and a frame, so that's all like .NET MAUI elements that you should work with. We're applying a style to this, so that's very cool. We'll get to styling and all of that. And inside of that, we have a grid, so no more horizontal stack layout. We have a little grid going on here now with an image that has a width request and a height request. But also this image is now source binding image. It kind of already did that in the data template, right? But this is kind of like the important thing that you want to note here, is suddenly inside of this item template, the scope kind of changed. So while the binding context, we'll get to that in a little bit, for this whole page is set to the view model, now suddenly inside of this item template, it is just set to 1 monkey because we're specifying here this item source of monkeys, and then each item inside of this collection view template is 1 monkey. So the binding suddenly changes to image and name and location, which are things that are inside monkey, right? right? So it's kind of like, this is one of the things that is the magic and what makes it a little bit hard to get started with all of this. I'm hoping to take that away, but this is kind of like the scope kind of changes like once you're inside of a item template, also for a list view or other kinds of layout things like this. So that's something that you will have to keep in mind. We're suddenly looking at a monkey object here, and we have to do the bindings this way. So this is set up now as well. What we want to have lastly, so outside of our collection view, we want to have a button to actually, get our monkey data now. So let's paste in this button. Let's give it a little extra space so it makes it more clear. And we have a button, which is just another layout element for .NET MAUI. We can give it a text so that you can recognize what it should do. We have a command, and this is binding back to our view model, right? So this is our get monkeys command that we've just set up. Is enabled, is bound to is not busy. So right, it's going to be disabled whenever we're already loading data so that we can't accidentally tap it multiple times. We're going to position this in the grid, right? Because this is contained in a grid, as we can see here. We're going to put it in the row 1 and then column 0. So that's kind of like the bottom left. And we give it a style. Again, styling is going to come, and we give it a little margin, which is, again, a little styling thing. But now we have a button to actually trigger our loading of data. Now, because we have the is busy, let's do another interesting thing, which is the activity indicator. So let's just paste that in here. We have an activity indicator. Again, this is a built-in control for .NET MAUI, which shows, depending on the platform, it's a indication spinner, something like that. You can style it in a couple of ways. But here we can again say is visible, and now we're binding to is busy, right? So whenever we're busy, we're going to show this loading indicator. The same for is running. That's kind of like if it shows the animation, yes or no. That's usually tied together. We're going to do the horizontal options and the vertical options. So we're going to set it really in the center of, like, our grid, the bottom row, because what we're going to say here is grid.row span. So it spans 2 rows. Well, actually, it's going to show then over the whole page, right? It's going to show in kind of like the whole page, and it's going to center it there, and the column span too as well. So we're going to see it over the whole screen here. Now there is one last thing. Well, actually, a couple of things that we still need to do. But for the view, there is one important thing that we still need to do, and that is go over to our Solution Explorer. We still have a main page.xaml.cs, which is the code behind, and the only thing, and really the only code that you want to have here, is this initialize component, which actually inflates all the XAML and all the things that we've just set up. But you also want to do now is binding context, which is like, well, it's not this actually. Binding context is the property that it's going to look at for all the properties that you're data binding to. So whenever in this XAML we're going to say item source is binding monkeys, it needs to know the object where it's looking for, right? So it already kind of knows through this data type, but like I said, this is only something that helps you with editing the XAML. It doesn't really mean anything. So what you really want to do is set this binding context to our view model so that it knows where to actually get the properties from. So that's kind of like your only one-way connection, hard reference to the view model right here. And again, what we can do here is use dependency injection. So what we can say here is our monkeys view model, and I can set the binding context to monkeys view model. And now the only thing we need to do is set up our dependency injection actually, and this will all kind of like fall together as a puzzle that we are just solving, and it will start working, and we will have actual data coming from a remote source showing in our Monkey Finder application. Now, to set up the dependency injection, do you still, oh, little pop quiz, do you still need to know where you need to go in your application? That's right, our MAUI program.cs. So let's go over to the Solution Explorer once more. And here at the bottom, where I'm a little bit in the way right here, we have our MAUI program. So let's open that up. And here we can actually see that we've registered our singleton for our main page already. And what we want to kind of like add now is add the rest here that we still need to do. So let's get the IntelliSets to help us. So what we want to do here is add our services as well. I'm using monkeyfinder.services. That's where our services are. And now we can register our other things. So what we want to do is do builder.services dot add singleton, which is actually, I think we shouldn't register singletons for these kinds of things. I think a better option is to do add transient right here, so that you will get a new instance each time. so that we don't get any weird results. So we want to do well, for the monkey service, actually, we do want to have a singleton, I guess. But I think for the pages and the view models, we want to add the add transient. You should look into data binding scopes, data dependency injection scopes, not data binding scopes, dependency injection scopes for all of this. But add transient basically means that whenever a new thing is requested of the main page, you will just get a new instance. A singleton, there is only one object that has this object in the entire application, so you will always get the same service. And you will also have an add scoped, which is, I think a little less used in this context. For HTTP and web applications, it's a little bit different. So we have this one, and let's do also the builder.services.add transient for our monkey view model. There we are. And now that we register these, we don't really need to do anything else because our main page is already set up here. And if we then go look at like our app.xaml.cs, we have this new app shell, and inside of our app shell, we're going to have then our initialize component. But where are we actually setting our main page now? I think that's happening here through our app shell. If we scroll a little bit down here, you can see this shell content, and it's going to do this main page thing, right? That's what I kind of like explained in the previous video. So we're going to have this main page right here. And from here, shell now implements the dependency injection as well. So it will resolve this main page. That's why we needed to register it in our MAUI program. And whenever you start resolving one thing and use the constructor injection, it will start trickling down and it will resolve all the things basically. So now I'm kind of nervous, but I want to just start my Windows application, and we're going to build all these things. And what we should see is a empty UI at first, but we now have a button that we can click to actually pull in our monkey data right here, and that will show the little activity indicator. I'm not sure how, if we're going to see that because my internet connection is pretty good, but we should see that a little bit, and ultimately we should see our list of monkeys. Well, so far so good. We have a little bit of a UI. Because I did a little bit of styling in the app shell already, this button looks a little bit stylized, so that's something that we will get to later. And whenever I click this get monkeys, it's now going to, we see the activity indicator, which is nice, and it's going to get the monkeys from the JSON service that we just saw, right? So we now have a couple of more monkeys that we got from the internet, from a remote web service, and everything kind of like falls together here. And whenever I do this, it should be pretty fast because, as you remember, we implemented that little check if we already had something in our collection, and we're just going to return that. So now, kind of like end-to-end with MVVM, data binding, dependency injection, we have created this monkey finder that pulls in actual data. But Gerald, you promised us that there would be an easier way to do all of this. Well, you're absolutely right. So you can do everything that is needed for MVVM and data binding and all that stuff that is inside of the box for .NET MAUI. You don't need any extra dependencies, but it will require a little bit of extra manual work, right? Because some people don't like to use frameworks. Some people would like to have full control over everything that's going on, which is perfectly fine. Choose whatever you want. But if you are using an MVVM framework, it can make your life easier. Depending on the framework you're choosing, you will get different features to either write less boilerplate code. That's kind of like I think the goal for the most frameworks. You can do view model to view model navigation, something that you don't need to worry about right now. You will get all this stuff. Now, there is the CommunityToolkit.Mvvm, which is kind of like the spiritual successor of MVVM Lite, and it's doing an amazing job. It relies on source generators. So basically, compile time, it will generate all these source things for you that you don't need to write yourself. So it's C# code, writing C# code, and it will make your life so much easier. So let's have a quick look at how we can reduce our code by implementing all of that. Now here we are back at our base view model, and I already mentioned it here, like for this is busy one, we don't want to write kind of like all this code, right? This is like from line 8 to line 20. So this is like 12 lines of code for each property that we want to have. So that will be gigantic, something like that. So we don't want to do this. Now, for this solution, if you opened this one from the repository, then we can already see in our Monkey Finder project, if we right-click and do Manage NuGet Packages, we can see in the installed one, we already have the CommunityToolkit.Mvvm one, so it's already installed. You can just use this straight away. But actually, this doesn't only work for .NET MAUI, it works for kind of like all C# projects, all .NET projects. So if you want to use it somewhere else, be my guest, definitely do that. And what we can do now is basically remove all of everything, I guess. I think we can just stick with this right now. And well, actually, we don't even need this anymore. So note, mind you, we just want to, and this needs to be properties, right? So what we want to do here is we can add some attributes now here. We can say, I want this to be an observable property, right? And what we can also say, oh, we still want to kind of like have this is not busy one. We still need that one. We still need it as a separate property. It's not going to generate that for us. So we are going to keep this one is not busy, and we're going to say not is busy. Which it now still knows, right? Because it will already pick up on this is something that's being generated, so it will still understand that this is a thing. And the same thing we can do for title. So now we have an observable property title, boom, and it will generate all the properties for us. We just need these backing fields right here, and we can generate the observable properties from this. Now, what else do we want to do? What we also can do is say we want to make this a also notify change for, and we can mention the name of is not busy. So this is kind of like our little extra thing that we had, like, hey, we do want to do on property changed for also the is not busy, right? We just need to add this extra attribute, and boom, we now also have it for the is not busy. In fact, we can remove this whole thing. We can remove both of these. We don't need this anymore. But what we do need to do, you can see the BaseViewModel is not really happy, and now the INotifyPropertyChanged isn't happy anymore as well. And what you want to do, this is also a thing that comes from the CommunityToolkit.Mvvm. We just want to use this observable object, which has all the things that I just removed, basically, and the BaseViewModel. Oh, we need to make this partial because that's the way how the source generators work. It of course joins these classes. It generates another partial class for the BaseViewModel to actually generate all the code for the isBusy and that kind of stuff. So now it will be happy again, our observable object, and we still have all the same things here, right? So if I run this again, it will still work as it did before, but now we have a lot less code. Remember that we had like 12 lines for isBusy and 12 lines for title? 12-ish. We now only have 12 lines of code basically for our whole view model, right? So that's pretty epic. And if I go here, it will still all work the same, but now it will work with much less code. So that will definitely make your life as a developer easier. Okay, sit back, relax. This was a lot to take in. You have learned how to do MVVM. You know what MVVM is. You learned how to do data binding, dependency injection, learned all this stuff that you could immediately forget because now you can use the CommunityToolkit.Mvvm. And we actually, have our first functioning applications that will get monkey data from a JSON source on the internet, show it in a nice way in a collection view in your .NET MAUI application. This is pretty much a lot to take in, right? So great job, you did awesome today. Feel free to take 5 minutes off before you go to the next part. No, definitely not. You should follow this on your own pace. But I think, go over all the steps here, reread some things that might not be clear to you immediately. But I think this is a pretty good foundation on which you can build the rest of your .NET MAUI application, because this is something that will come back in every mobile and desktop application for that matter. This is just a big part of how applications work these days. So well done. Now I ran it again on Windows, but you could just as well switch to the Android emulator that we've set up. So that might be a nice exercise for you to also be in shock that you can use this exact same code base on Android as well. So switch over to that Android target, run it on Android. Maybe you have that Mac build host set up. Just run it on your Mac, your iOS simulator, which is pretty epic to see that your application is just running across all of these platforms. So you can do that as a exercise of your own. We're going to look at, for the next video, video to navigation, so that we can click an actual monkey and we can get some details there, because now we got this data, we want to kind of drill into that and see where we can go from there to other pages and do other kinds of awesome things. So find the navigation video right here, or you can go to the playlist, which is right here. And of course, you want to check if you're subscribed for the next videos that are landing right here. See you for the next one.